Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Afterburner. I'm Bill Whittle. Well, 2012 is over and we're heading into 2013. It's actually a weird and tremendously useful and encouraging idea, isn't it? The idea of a new year, kind of a chance to wipe the slate clean and try again. Now, as usual for this time of year, people naturally tend to wonder what has ended and what we might expect in the year to come. Will the Senate finally pass a budget? Will Hillary Clinton have a manicure scheduled that'll make her unable to testify in the events in Benghazi? Will Barack Obama have time to write a third autobiography? Well, no one can say. But big things are often easier to predict than small things, and I'd like to take a stab at big changes that I think are coming, the biggest possible changes, really. They may not get here complete in 2013, but they are coming, and much of it is already here, perhaps invisible, hiding in plain sight. Now, a few years ago, I had a chance to hear the brilliant Thaddeus McCotter, late representative from the great state of Michigan. He had the profound insight that governments take the shape needed to manage an economy and not the other way around. He said that a vertically structured, top-down government worked for an industrial-era economy, but in a world where an individual could just pick up their smartphone and order steel from China while eating dinner, well, that kind of top-heavy government simply is not agile enough for an information-age economy. And that got me to thinking. You know, there have been three great ages in the history of mankind, three waves of innovation that utterly transformed the way all society looks. The first wave, agriculture, began about 7,000 years ago. It changed humans from being hunters and gatherers and allowed them to remain in one spot long enough to build cities. And that meant the specialization of labor and all of the advances that that brought. Then about 300 years ago came the second wave, the Industrial Revolution, where steam power and then other forms of energy vastly expanded the ability of people to make ever more complex machines, to make life easier and remake the landscape. And finally, starting about 50 years ago or so, the third great age, the information age, the age we find ourselves increasingly living in today. You're watching this program because of the information age. So how do these megatrends allow us to get a glimpse of the different political world that's coming? Well, our founding fathers invented America in the 1770s, and their vision of a society was squarely based on a first wave, that is, an agricultural era economy. If you think about it, so many of the foundational ideas of America represent the agricultural era in which the founders and the framers moved. These were fiercely independent people, the vast majority of whom lived on farms. Dispersion of power among federal, state, and local levels made perfect sense to them, and regulations like building codes or gun control laws were such an anathema to them that they simply never imagined the need for any of that nonsense. And so they designed an America that was unique among the nations of the world, a nation dedicated to leaving people alone. And all of the freedoms that we now enjoy were the result of people who lived very independent and self-regulated lives. Now, by the time you get into the late 1800s and early 1900s, however, the second great wave, the industrial age, was upon us, and the government began to change in order to deal with the new realities, and those were primarily the realities of urbanization. Factories needed large numbers of people to live and work close to each other so that the output of various mills and factories could be fed into each other to make the new products that were changing the world. And so the progressive movement was born, and with it, the so-called progressive amendments, things like income tax, prohibition, and since then, entire oceans of legislation designed not to protect people from a distant government, but rather legislation empowering an ever-growing government to solve what were essentially urban industrial issues, things like mass transit, public health, environmental protection, retirement benefits, none of which was needed in an agricultural America. And so, as the American economy became more and more top-down and centralized, McCotter's point was that the government had to mirror that change. That America lasted until about the mid-60s, more or less, an IBM kind of top-down, hierarchical, one job and benefits for life kind of world. But that world, while not completely gone, is going, and it's going fast. It's being replaced by the third great age of innovation, the information age, which we are half in and half out of as we enter 2013. If you want to know why unions are losing power all across the country as the government paradoxically grows ever stronger and more centralized, well, it seems to me that this is simply because the economy leads and the government, as usual, follows. Unions are second wave industrial era inventions. They have very little place in a decentralized, fast-paced, extremely competitive information age economy, and the worst excesses of the Industrial Revolution that brought unions about in the first place are long behind us now. There are no graphic designer or web developer unions. It's a gig-based world we're moving into. And the government's going to have to follow. There's simply no way that this monolithic, lumbering, stupid, uncompetitive, top-down, hierarchical, fossilized dinosaur of a government could ever manage the economy that is half here and half arriving. And I think that that will ultimately be our salvation, only because of its inevitability. The coming government structure will have to be far more decentralized, networked, versatile, and agile than it is today. It won't look exactly like our decentralized first wave government that we had for our first 100 years or so, but it will look a lot more like that government than the monolithic, lurching giant that's dying before our very eyes. Look, you can call it sour grapes if you want to, or you can just face the facts. Because I think Barack Obama has inherited a government that cannot and will not survive, at least not in anything like its present form. He's implementing policies that worked 100 years ago and are utterly out of step with the realities of the new economy. And I'm left thinking of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, a spindly-armed, big-toothed reptile, bellowing out his triumph as the light from the incoming asteroid glows in the sky behind him out of sight. So, Happy New Year, my friends. It's going to get interesting.